I saw The Seven Samurai, I think when I was maybe 12 or 13. I saw it, when the movies used to play at night, and then at the end of the evening, the white snow would come on, because that would mean the end of the evening. That's way back in the olden days, by the way, before they had cable. And they used to play the black and white movies, and I would watch it with my grandmother. And they used to play Westerns and things like that. That's when I first saw Magnificent Seven and all the other films. But when I saw The Seven Samurai, it kind of blew me away. I mean, I had no idea who Kurosawa was. I couldn't wait for the title sequence to end. It went on forever with all the names. But it introduced me to a world that, for me growing up in the ghettos of America, it sort of opened my mind to another world that I wanted to experience. And watching how Kurosawa crafted the story and the compositions and the action for the final battle, and the idea that, because I grew up poor, and there's always the influence of bullies, when you grow up, whether it be gangs or anything. And when I saw the warlords that came in and, took the people's rights, and it reminded me of a world that I know in a strange way of what that means when people come in and take something that doesn't belong to them. And it just kind of blew me away. It really did. It transformed my thinking. And it was just amazing. And since then, ironically, when I went to college, I studied the arts. I went to school to be an electrical engineer, and I took an art class, a Baroque art class, and they were discussing different painters, and Kurosawa's storyboards were paintings as well. And it came up again. It was like haunting me, this guy Kurosawa. And I was like, who is this guy? It was amazing. Then I saw Rand and all of his other films, and it really made me want to be a filmmaker. Kurosawa was the reason I want to make movies. Movies are influenced by their times, what's happening in the world. And Kurosawa's film is classic because the DNA of the story still remains the same. Tyranny needs to be fought by good people. That was always the story of Kurosawa. Samurai, meaning to serve, is what samurai means. Magnificent Seven, same idea, to serve. And there's always the burning question of, when does one sacrifice themselves for the greater good, for another human being? So it doesn't matter at what point in time that you tell that story, it's always going to be relevant. And in today's society, as we see in the news, it's even more relevant than ever. The good people have to step forward. Even some of the rougher type of characters have to step forward to do the right thing. So that's why I think it's the right time for it. I never tried intentionally to so-called update it. I was just trying to tell a strong story and put my own stamp on the story. But what was most important for me was to keep the DNA of Kurosawa's story, not to stray too far from that idea. I think what's most relevant is obviously the cast. It's a very diverse cast, which you don't see normally in these type of movies. So to have Mr. Lee, BH, in this type of film, I think is fantastic. To have Denzel Washington as the lead, I think is fantastic. So that in itself, and then my own aesthetics, the way I shot it and things like that, brings its own, contemporary feel. But that's as far as I went to try. And I didn't try to be cool. I didn't try to put rap in it. I wanted to make it, true to the genre, so to speak. The group dynamic, it was very interesting, because you never know when you're trying to put together actors of that magnitude all together, and hope everyone gets along. So, you know, as a director, you're a little nervous the first day when you get everybody in the room together. You worry that there's going to be egos and all these different things. But it honestly wasn't, because if it was, I would tell you. It wasn't, because Chris is hilarious. Chris Pratt would come in the room and immediately start cracking jokes. Like, just immediately. It's just his nature. He's just a good guy. Denzel, I learned something from Denzel, which I try to take into my life. He said, you know, a sheep herder leads from behind, not always in front. And I thought that was very humble of a man of his stature to say that. Yeah. And I watched him sort of sit back and sort of lead these guys. Ethan's always full of energy. He's sort of like Ethan Hawke just has more energy than anybody I've ever seen in my life. I swear to you, he doesn't even drink that much coffee. He just has this he just comes in the room and he's like, he loves it. He's just talking, and you can't get a word in, you know, he just goes. And Vincent D'Onofrio is just such a powerful actor. And Ethan and Vincent are best friends. Oh. So they had a rhythm. Byung-Hun Lee, how'd I do?
Nice. Got it right.
He's going to be so proud of me, by the way, that I did that. Him and Ethan spent a lot of time together because they're partners in the movie. And they just got along fantastic. In fact, I was telling the guys, they used to all go go-kart racing, you know, driving go-karts on a weekend. And they've never invited me, by the way. And I was wondering, did they not like me or something? But they didn't want the director around, I guess. But yeah, so it was a pretty amazing experience to have all these guys together. And luckily, they all got along. It's very diverse, and I mixed it with how I see the world. I didn't think about it as I'm going to have a Mexican, I'm going to have an Indian. I really didn't. It was a matter of who was right for the parts. And Manuel, as a matter of fact, I met with Manuel, and when I met him, I thought he was just a charming, and he was what I considered the aesthetics of a man. You know, he's tall, and he was really a gentleman. And he didn't get the part at first. I was going to hire a gentleman from Brazil, the guy from Elite Squad, but he was doing Narco for Netflix. And I hired Manuel after, but I met him before, and I really liked him a lot. So it wasn't an intentional, I didn't think about it that way. I just wanted to just make the world the way I see the world, which is diverse. He was just he's a great actor. And when you see him in the movie, he's fantastic. And I never thought about any of them as black or Native American or Asian or anything. They're just my actors. People say it more to me than I actually really thought about it. I was too busy trying to get BH's name right. I was, you know, Manuel, I was, you know, working with him and these guys. And Martin, who's the youngest actor of them all, the Native American kid, I was trying to help him along the way, but I didn't really, I don't see the world that way, you know? Great actors are great actors, whoever fit the part. James Horner was an amazing artist. He was one of the most incredible people I ever met. But he was a very gentle, loving father, and he was a great friend. This movie probably wouldn't have happened without James. I mean, a quick story is when I was doing Southpaw, I couldn't, like I said, when you have this type of movie and this big movie with all these people, it's hard to get everybody's schedule and all the money, and it's a whole thing. And I was feeling very frustrated one day before I got the green light for the movie. And I was almost ready to give up from making the movie because I couldn't get all the people together. And I went to James's house to listen to the score of Southpaw. And for whatever reason, as life goes, I go to his house, and before I go into his studio, which I'll tell you about in a minute, he just stands outside, and he's a little guy, he's very slight, and he speaks very softly, and he says, "So how's it going with the Magnificent Seven?" And I started to complain, you know, whining, and James started talking, and he said, "Well, you know," and he lived in a place called Calabasas. And he said, you know, they used to ride horses here in Calabasas. This is a horse trail. And he started telling me about where he lived out there. And he said, they used to make Westerns out there. And he said, Antoine, he goes, you and Denzel, Magnificent Seven, Sorrow, you have to do the movie. And I said, I don't know if I have enough money. He said, well, what are you worried about? I'll do it. I said, what if I don't have enough money for you? He goes, don't worry. He said, figure it out. Like basically shut up and figure it out. Stop whining. And then after that, he took me inside his studio. In James's studio, he has no posters, no Academy Awards, nothing. What he has is toys from around the world from 18th century up to that. He had a tornado maker machine. He had puppets from around the world. He was an engineer. He used to fly planes, which is how he died. He had airplanes. It was like walking into a beautiful mine. It was the most amazing thing I ever saw. Toys everywhere, in no order. It was just everywhere. A room bigger than this. And it reminded me of the wonderment and how beautiful life can be if you remain a child and keep your mind open to these things and dream. And when I left James, I called MGM and I said, if I can figure everything out, this was on a Friday, by Monday, you got to give me a green light on the movie. So I made all the phone calls, cut where I had to cut, and do all the things I had to do. I spent all weekend doing that, and by Monday, I got a green light on the movie. And then James passed away, and so which was a heartbreak, obviously. But while I was making the movie, after he died, his manager and the composer who finished the movie called me, and he said, James had a gift for you, and we want to bring it to you. And I'm thinking it was a gift from one of the toys from his place, because I kept asking him, can I just come and sit on his floor and look at the toys? It was honestly fast. It should be in the museum, what he had. And they came to my trailer, and he said, James wrote the score for you. And I thought, what do you mean James wrote the score for me? How? He didn't see any footage. He never saw the movie. He said, yeah, he went through the script, and he already started to compose the music, and he was going to surprise you. And they played it for me, seven songs. It was actually 7 songs. Wow. It was 7 songs. And yeah, it blew me away. It was magnificent. Yeah, so James is an amazing human being. The process was, MGM came to me. One day, MGM, the studio, Roger Birnbaum and John Glickman and Gary Barber, I was having a meeting about Southpaw, because they wanted to make Southpaw with me and Jake Gyllenhaal. But I didn't make that movie with them. I made it with Harvey Weinstein. But then they called me and said, after meeting me, they said, do you like Westerns? Do you like, Magnificent Seven, which is kind of like, of course. And they said, well, would you want to make that movie? And I thought, yes and no, because it's the 7 Samurai. And let me read the script. And they sent me the script, and they did a really good job. And they, like I said, they kept the structure and the DNA of Kurosawa's movie. And I had a few changes, and when I met with them, it was it was one of those things where I was not going to do it. But when I was in the room, I was thinking about how to do it, and that's when I thought about Denzel playing the lead role. And I thought that would be fun, and that's a good way to go about it. And once we all agreed to that, I flew to New York and met with Denzel, and he agreed to do the film. That's how it all came about. Ryan and Mr. Lee, yeah, they worked very closely together. We would choreograph everything and videotape it, and those guys would come back with ideas for me. And he's so graceful. He's so graceful. He's like a ballet dancer. He's like so elegant, you know what I mean? And in fact, when he would come into the room sometime, when we first was doing dress rehearsals and doing stunts, Denzel would lean over and go, stay away from that guy. That guy's like the coolest guy in the room. He was just the coolest guy in the room. And so we would work really closely together on all the stunts. And he had a lot of ideas. His look, his whole, like a lot of it was his idea. I always do that with actors, let them create their ideas. But with the action, he was very influential. He was very helpful. I always try to get it in camera. It's just more organic, especially with animals and all that. I just never believe it, you know. We had to use a little bit, obviously, for some mountains or something, you know, those sort of things. But for all the action, it's all live action, which is not easy. With horses, they do whatever they want. And 100 and something falls a day, you know, you're nervous because people get run over and things like that. But I try to avoid too much CG with action because I think the audience can sense what's real and what's not. It starts to look phony. You can never recreate, you know, that texture. But I shot it on film. I was trying to stay true to that. I shot it anamorphic. I was more of a classic approach as opposed to the typical CG trickery. In retrospect, I may have thought about some CG after I was down there in 110 degrees and the horses didn't want to run down the hill. And I kept thinking, you know, CG, I don't have to argue with like horses and people and stunt guys and, you know, but they were great. We remain very close as friends and as working together as partners that way. It's like jazz musicians. We just have, it's a rhythm. It's interesting. Sometimes you have that rhythm with people. I have that with Ethan. I have it with Denzel. There's some people that there's a, it's a very easy conversation. We respect each other quite a bit. It evolves over the years as I see him changing or as he sees me changing. He knows how much I love Westerns. He knows how much I love action movies. So when I went to see him about doing this movie, he kind of sat down at lunch with me and he just started smiling. He's like, you want to do this, don't you? You want to make this what? Do you want to do it? I said, oh, come on, I can see you coming over the hill in all black. I described it to him. He just started laughing. He goes, all right, I'll do it. Let's do it. You know? So that's kind of how we are. But he's, like I said, he's a great leader. He's a great leader. You don't get to make these kind of movies anymore, right? We sort of have abandoned some of that classic films like that. With Denzel, like I said, he just tortured me on purpose. You know, he kind of dragged me out, then he finally just made me fly to New York and have lunch and paint the whole picture, you know, and which is kind of what he does to me sometimes. But he said yes. Ethan Hawke, when I did Equalizer, I was in New York, and he heard that I may do Magnificent Seven. He literally grabbed me and put me against the wall and said, if you do this effing movie without me, I'll kill you. So I was like, don't worry, you're in. So he was there. Vincent D'Onofrio were friends. We called Vincent and said, if I do this movie, are you in? He said, I'm in. Chris was, you know, he had so many offers. And I wasn't sure if I was going to get Chris or not. But ironically, when I got Chris on the phone, I was in my office. They said, okay, Chris is on the phone. He wants to talk to you about Magnificent Seven. As soon as I picked up the phone, he started singing Old Shondora, this old Western song. He just started singing. And I knew he was in. So it really kind of came together. BH was the final, I think, actor. And just so happens with him is that he was in New Orleans doing something else when I was there. And I had admired him when I first saw A Bittersweet Life years ago. And someone said, would you like to meet him? I said, absolutely. I couldn't wait to meet the guy. And he drove up to see me. And right away, I wanted him in the movie as soon as he walked in the room. So that came together pretty easy. It was just scheduling that was hard.